Welcome back to Candy's Art World. I'm Candy, and today I'm going to be doing uh, a fall squirrel. It was suggested by 1234UZ when he made the first comments on the review video I posted on Tuesday. I'm going to be using Jane Davenport watercolors neutral palette mostly, and a little bit from the bright palette. Also use Arteza color pencil. This will be my very first piece where I mix watercolors and color pencils. Never done it before, so this is technically a mixed media piece of art. And this little squirrel is going to be like sitting in a road munching on some grub uh, with trees changing colors for the season in the background and leaves everywhere. You can see I made the horizon line, and now I'm starting to pencil in the squirrel. I'm using that pencil I reviewed last week, or not last week, Tuesday. I think it shows up better on video than my other pencils. And this video is sped up about half as fast as it was normally. Might seem like I'm drawing fast. I really wasn't drawing that fast. I was trying to get the squirrel as accurate as I could with pencil before I started watercoloring in the background. The photograph that I used was from, one second, I will tell you. Pixabay. It's a great website that you can use their painting or pictures. It's photographs for any inspiration, or you can use them on your web pages or whatever. I found a cute little squirrel, and I decided that would be the one I drew for this. I penciled in some of the tree trunks. Just wanted to make sure I knew where I was going before I started the watercolor. try to have some shorter looking tree that pushed it further back in the distance. They're not really shorter trees, they're just further away. And give a little depth. And I also end up drawing out a few leaves that I will be doing in color pencil as well. So it'll be the squirrel and these, I think 3 leaves that I'll be doing in color pencil. The rest will be watercolor. Some of the shadings and color pencil too. And a little branch right in front of the squirrel. I guess it's not a branch, it's a twig. He's a little squirrel. I have a round paintbrush. It's super cheap round paintbrush. I use it this whole piece. I don't switch my paintbrush except for when I'm adding water to the paper. I have a clean paintbrush I use for that, so I don't accidentally tint the paper. And that also is really cheap. It was a freebie on what is that called? A Wish. Yeah, I ordered. You just pay shipping on these ones, and the quality isn't really all that great. The bristles are not even, but it works good for, well, I don't know about good. It worked okay for me to wet my paper with. And this for the sky, I'm doing wet on wet technique. I wanted to have a blue sky this time. A light blue sky. So it would contrast with the orange and green leaves a little bit more than the yellow sky I did on the last fall scene. And I went back to my clean brush to help blend it out sometimes. And I went ahead and just painted over the trees I drew in and everything. So that way there wouldn't be white behind the leaves. There'd be the blue sky. So with painting, you kind of work on layers. You go to the furthest back, and then the things that are closer to the camera or viewer or whatever, you add those after. Sometimes you have to work around things, like if you wanted white in your painting for watercolor, you have to leave that, because white really isn't a thing too much in watercolor. But you can also lift it back just with a clean, really wet paintbrush. You can lift the color back up if you accidentally got color where you didn't want it. I'm really enjoying doing watercolor. This piece only took me like 2 hours to complete. That's with, I had to let it dry between and all that stuff. Do a couple different layers of things. I had to do the sky and then the branches. First the sky, let it dry, then the branches, let it dry, and then the leaves. But it still didn't take very long to do. Not that I mind taking a while to do a piece, but sometimes it's nice to get a whole piece done in like 2 hours. Here I am doing wetting of the street. Decided to do in smaller portions instead of doing the whole street at once, like I did the sky. And I mixed black and brown and gray. Try to make a color appropriate to represent a street. And in the photo, the back of the street was getting some light, so I had to go back and lift a little bit to represent the light being back there. Here you can see me lifting it. And I went to wet the paper next, and I used the wet brush to get color. So I decided, okay, I'll use it and then clean my brush and just use some of the color that was already put down and spread it out. This is the last part of the wet on wet. The rest I do wet on dry, where the brush is wet but the paper's dry. This layer was kind of flat and I ended up adding some texture to it, so it's not just one flat color. And my trick to give texture or to lighten color, I like to just grab some paper towel. It really helps add texture to the street. Here I am just kind of dabbling in some color to add more texture. Not doing it in a smooth method, just kind of stippling and wiggling it on. And I was trying to give a little bit more darkness under those leaves that I drew in. Try to give it shadow. And added some shadow under the squirrel. I was testing for dryness there. Make sure that it was dry. I mixed mostly brown with a little black for the tree trunks. And the lighter pressure you put on the brush, the skinnier your lines will be. If you want it thicker, you put a little bit more pressure on the brush. And it opens up the bristles and makes the line thicker. And you don't have to worry about having perfectly straight lines for trees. The more texture, the better. I used to be the most intimidated about trees because they just seemed like would be the hardest thing in the world to try and duplicate. I figured out if you don't try to actually duplicate them and just kind of just try to represent that that's a tree, it seems to work out better than trying to make it exactly the same tree. And this time I decided to go ahead and try to give these trees a little bit more dimension. Even though they are in the background, I wanted them to look a little bit more realistic. So in this photo, the light was coming from between the trees, the two rows of trees. So I try to have the lighter portion of the trunks be towards the center and the darker towards the edges. So on the right side, the left side of the trees will be lighter, and on the left side, the right side of the trees will be lighter. Here I am mixing colors for leaves. This time it's not completely orange and yellow. Tried to make it browns and oranges and greens this time. And no, normally you wouldn't have leaves all the way down to the ground on a tree, but it's representing the trees back in the distance behind it too on this. So that's why there's leaves down. And my technique for leaves is dab. I don't know if that's a technical art term, but it is what I did. Just dabbed on the leaves. And try to leave some of the sky showing in some places. So if you have green in your palette, but it seems a little bright, you can add its opposite and it will tone down the color a little bit. So the opposite of green is red. So if you add a reddish color to it, I used like a sienna kind of color. It's like orangey red brown. That helped tone it down a little bit so it's not just like bam Crayola. No offense, Crayola. I hardly ever just use a color without mixing it with something else anyways. I don't know if that's just habit or what. I tend to mix colors instead of using them straight out of a tube or in this case a watercolor palette. And here I am adding little leaves onto the street. It was a little harder to have them show up in the darker zones, but added some anyways. Give it some interest. I felt like I needed a little more orange in the trees. And these are my color pencil. My color pencil set is Arteza. They're a pretty good color pencil set for the price. Really, really good color pencil sets can be like near $300 or more. I didn't have the money for that, especially not knowing how much I would end up using color pencils. But this set I've seemed to be using quite often. You can see some of my color pencils are shorter than others from being sharpened. Decided to start with the leaves so I can kind of get a feel for how the two mediums work together. It ended up working pretty well because I always thought when I used my odorless mineral spirits to blend out the color pencils, it made it look very similar to watercolor anyways. So I thought this would be a good thing to combine the two mediums. But just because it was two different mediums, I still wanted to use the same color palette. So that way it didn't look totally out of place. But that's a good thing about color pencils is you can blend them and you can layer them up and you can blend them out. The mineral spirits, odorless mineral spirits I have is Mona Lisa brand. That I don't think it matters what brand you use. I mean, maybe some are better than others. I've only used the Mona Lisa so far still. I do not know. If you know, you can comment below if other kinds are better or not. If there's some you should avoid, you can comment at the bottom. But the mineral spirits really are odorless, so I don't want you to pour this into a cup that you might actually use to drink out of. I use a little shot glass that stays in my art studio so nobody else will accidentally drink out of this, because I'm sure that's pretty toxic. But to use the odorless mineral spirits, you build up layers of the color pencil, and then you put down, you blend it out with the mineral spirits, then you let the paper dry. Because if you go back in with the color pencil while it's wet, you run the risk of damaging the paper. Watercolor is one of the fastest mediums to work in, I've found, for myself anyways, and color pencil is one of the slowest mediums to work in, because you have to slowly build up the layers so you don't smush the paper to where it doesn't take any more color. the first time you blend out with the mineral spirits, you can have your paintbrush a little bit more damp, but then the subsequent layers you want to make it less damp, like almost dry, because if not, you'll end up lifting the color pencil, and that defeats the purpose of all those layers. And here's my handy dandy pencil sharpener. When you use a sharper pencil, it gets into the tooth of the paper better, so that it doesn't leave as much white texture behind. At least with the paper I use, because I use watercolor paper, it's got some texture to it, and if you have a dull pencil, it kind of skips over the texture. With a sharper pencil, it gets down in the grooves. And then you use your odorless mineral spirits to help blend into the little grooves that might have got missed. And I was adding a little bit more color pencil shadowing underneath the leaves, and the squirrel got a little bit more precise shadowing. Added a little bit of shadow under some of the little dabbed leaves I used watercolor for. If you decide to do this, you can put a lot more detail in those leaves too, if you'd like. It seems as though the odorless mineral spirits doesn't end up messing with the watercolor. I was a little worried that it might, but it didn't, at least not in the little amounts that I was using for on the road. Here I am trying to decide what colors I'm going to use on the squirrel. With color pencil, it's a lot like watercolor. You have to start with your lighter colors and build up to your darker colors, darker values. I went with a light gray to start with. And the photo, it seemed like that was the undercolor for a lot of the squirrel. I'm not sure what particular kind of squirrel this is. He was just a cute squirrel, so he's cute squirrel breed. I was just getting like a base layer of color onto him. I end up adding the texture, a little bit more texture to him in subsequent layers. It's still beneficial to run with the grain of the hairs or the fur while coloring them in. But it doesn't matter as much at first. And here I am adding the little twig. I had forgot to add that twig in the drawing process, so I kind of just drew it in as I was going with the color pencil. Because in the photo, he had leaves and twigs in front of him, so I couldn't see his little feet, his hind feet, so I can't draw it if I don't see it, because I don't know what squirrel feet look like too much. So I added in a little twig. Again, sharper the pencil, the better it gets into the tooth of the paper. And this little squirrel had like a light brown around the eye, like a ring, and then brown blended up and through the gray. And I used a little peach too to try to get the lighter tones in on the face and the ears. And I was trying to make his tail fluffy. It's a little harder to do with the watercolor already in place. But I go in a little heavier handed when I get to it to make a little bit more like individual furs. Again with my handy dandy pencil sharpener. Adding the black into the eye. Being careful to leave a little white space because for like a little reflection in his eye to give it a little bit more dimension. I was gonna go ahead and blend it out, but then I decided I should put some white color pencil down to help protect that white spot. And this is a Derwent white color pencil. Add some to his belly because in the picture he had a white belly. Pretty much just to protect that area from blending out the other colors. You see I dabbed the paintbrush into the odorless mineral spirits, and then I kind of rake it off up the side of the shot glass to make sure that there wasn't too much moisture in the brush. Going with just the very edge of my paintbrush to blend out that eye. It's good to have some paper towel so you can clean your brush, or you'll end up carrying some of the color over to other spots. And I was testing to see if it was dry yet before I started adding another layer. Added another layer to the eye first. And decided to change up that twig a little bit. I think it looks a lot more like a twig now. And adding the furs in, I use short, thin strokes of the color pencil and tried to keep some of the lighter color showing between. And made sure to add a little bit more of the brown colors. And again, this is sped up by 50%, so this took a lot longer than what it looks like because of all the little short little strokes of the pencil. Even though the belly was white, I had to use gray to try and give that little dimension, little shadow between the pieces of fur. Decided to try and zoom it in so you could see better what I was doing. I wanted to add more browns into the tail because this little squirrel has brown, gray, black kind of his tail, and his little face had brown in it. I apologize if my hand's in the way for most of the time. I used like a red brown and a orangey yellow and stuff like that to try and get depth of fluffy tailness. A trick if you're filling in big portions with the color pencil, do it on the side of the pencil and turn your pencil like a quarter of a turn while you're doing it, and it'll keep your point sharpened more for you, so you don't have to sharpen your pencil as much. But with this portion of it, I'm using the point of the pencil so it wears down a little quicker. It'll just help save you a color pencil from being sharpened too much if you can use the side of the pencil with lead. Here I was trying to add a little shadow underneath the squirrel chin and around squirrel arms to help them stand out a little bit more. And the little squirrel body, so it could be, so you can tell where the squirrel stops and the tail starts. And defining that little squirrel mouth a little bit, because this little squirrel's nibbling on something. I decided to try and use my white pencil to lighten up the ring around the eye a little bit, and it worked. So this white color pencil is pretty good. I mean, it won't bring it back to white, but it definitely lightens it up. Adding a little color to the little munchies that he found. giving him his nose back. And a final layer of mineral spirits. Try to calm down some of them fur lines. I'm really pleased at how this cute little squirrel turned out. Not perfect, but I think he's cute. I hope you enjoyed watching. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Have a great day.